Okay, it is 1 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I am Allison Eckhart. I am the Deputy Director for Communications for the Office of Science. I want to welcome you here to our webinar on the Climate Resilience Center's funding opportunity. Just a few things before we get into the webinar. This meeting will be recorded, and the recording of this meeting will be posted on the Biological and Environmental Research webpage after, well, probably next week. There are closed captions available. If you press the button at the bottom of your screen for closed captioning, they will appear. And there will be a Q&A session after the presentations, and we'll be using the Q&A function in Zoom. So there is a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. If you click on that, you can submit questions, and we will go through them and answer them. With that, I would like to introduce Dr. Jeff Stair. He's a program manager with BER. Jeff.
Thank you. Welcome to the Climate Resilience Centers. I personally am really excited about this. I'd like to introduce actually my colleagues, Brian Benscoter and Bob Valarian. You'll hear from each of them in turn. The three of us are co-equals in running this. If we could pop back one slide, please. I want to emphasize a couple of the deadlines. Pre-applications are required and are due January 19th at 5 o'clock. And the full application is March 30th at, well, basically midnight. So for all of these, I should mention that these slides will be made available at the end of the presentation or perhaps early next week. And we will have Q&A at the end of this, and we have the ability to go a little bit long if you like. So we're really excited about this one because this is the opportunity you'll have to dive in with some DOE supported researchers to work on some of the climate science itself and to translate this science to the communities that you are in and will be serving. So next slide, please. We'll start off with an introduction from Dr. Asmafalgar, the director of the Office of Science. She's really excited about this one, but she had a hard conflict, so she couldn't make it. Then we'll flip over to our boss, Gary Giernart, and then it's me and Bob and Brian, and I'll be talking about some of the background. Bob will dive into the CRC FOA itself, and then Brian will talk about some of the details. And we also have available here Mike Zarkin, who is our master of all things in detail oriented with this particular FOA. And he's been a huge help to us on all of these. So next slide, please. And Adrian, if you could cue up Dr. Berhe.
Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Asmafalgar, Director of DOE's Office of Science. Thank you for joining us today as we kick off the Climate Resilience Center's funding opportunity. This funding opportunity will establish climate resilience centers at minority serving institutions, historically Black colleges and universities, and emerging research institutions. The resulting research will have a big impact on strengthening our security and resilience, particularly in minoritized communities, which often bear the brunt of the climate crisis. The goal is to build more resilient communities by translating climate science research and creating more representative climate science community through a two-way engagement in research, training, and outreach. This opportunity is strongly aligned with our goal in the Office of Science to make significant improvements in the participation of folks from historically underrepresented, minoritized, and disadvantaged communities. The Climate Resilience Centers will reside at institutions that are integral parts of the most affected communities. This funding opportunity will empower local institutions to work with the community to translate basic research into actionable science to enhance climate resilience, as well as to identify research priorities for future DOE investments. We will enable ongoing DOE climate science and capabilities at our national laboratories and universities to build a two-way engagement between DOE-funded research and community stakeholders. Funding will emphasize science accessibility, translation for improved climate response, training, networking, and outreach. I am thrilled that this opportunity will build and empower a future pool of local talent and expertise, including young scientists, engineers, and technicians who will combine observational, experimental, and modeling techniques to address local resilience challenges and inform equitable solutions. We must work with all communities as we shape these programs and make sure that our efforts address the needs of the public we all share a responsibility to serve. We cannot afford to lose the perspective, the passion, or the promise of any voice who have something to contribute to our mission at the Office of Science. A guiding principle for me throughout my career is that as publicly funded scientists, we have a responsibility to ensure that our work is truly serving the public. I'm looking forward to seeing how you will serve the public through the Climate Resilience Centers. Thank you.
And next up is Gary.
Thanks, Jeff. I'm Gary Gernhardt. I'm actually a real person on this in this presentation instead of a video. But I just wanted to welcome everybody to this webinar. I recognize that you're calling in from various time zones, so I'll say good morning to some of you and good afternoon to others. And I'm looking forward to the rest of this 2 hours. The one thing I wanted to say is that the mission of our division is to advance a predictive understanding of the climate system in the very broad sense. And what that really means is that we invest in atmospheric, ecological, biogeochemical, oceanic, cryospheric components of the climate system and the human component of the climate system. And we try to combine all of these together to at least advance the science so that we can lead to solutions. Now, when I talk about solutions, one of the challenges we have is to identify what are the best solution pathways and how do we understand the resilience of the various components and the entire system. And that's a really exciting direction for us because this particular FOA is our first entry point into climate resilience research. And we're looking at you as being at the front edge of how DOE makes an impact in this field. So I'm looking forward to the next couple of hours. I'm thanking everybody for being on this call because without all of you, we wouldn't be here. So I think at this point, I'm going to pass the torch back to Jeff and have him continue with the early part of this show. And don't hesitate to ask questions along the way because this is not just informational to you from us, but we want to hear from you too. So thanks everybody. And next slide and back to Jeff.
Thank you, Gary. Just a little bit of perspective, a little bit of geography, so to speak. You can see we just heard from Asmafalgar, the director of the Office of Science, and below her is Biological Environmental Research, sort of the Uber organization above us. Todd Anderson is the acting associate director there. Our sister division, Biological System Science, led by Donna Dean right now. And we are in Earth and Environmental System Sciences, and you just heard from Gary. So next slide, please. This is kind of who we are. Gary went through this a little bit, but we have a particular example here that encompasses almost everything here. The goal of BER writ large is to understand complex biological earth and environmental systems. And our sister division is really about exploring the frontiers of genome-enabled biology. So a lot of the real kind of deeply involved genomics and other sorts of omics. In EASSD, we more focus on understanding the physical and biogeochemical earth system processes and to enable innovation and discovery through user facilities. And right at the bottom of the slide is a picture, not a gratuitous picture to show a beautiful Colorado Rocky Mountain scene, but that is the sail deployment of the ARM user facility inside the watershed function science focus area. This is a big project that emphasizes atmosphere through bedrock and some of the human interactions. There are cattle herding, there's legacy hard rock mining, there's even some current hard rock mining in the area. Studying this watershed to see it's part of the Colorado River Basin. That is the water tower to the west that will feed and water 40 million people. Next slide, please. Just to walk you through a little bit of the Earth System Sciences Division. On the left side is where I reside in atmospheric system research. That's my program, along with my colleagues. As part of atmospheric system research, we have the Atmospheric Radiation Measurement Facility, or the ARM facility. They're the ones that deployed the SAIL deployment on the previous slide. In the middle, we have Earth and Environmental Systems Modeling. This is where Bob resides using the human factors. A lot of climate and Earth system modeling there, climate resilience as well. And on the right, we have Environmental System Science, Ecosystem and Watershed Sciences. Brian Benscoter sits over here, and the Environmental Molecular Sciences Laboratory sits here as well. Undercutting all of these, spread across all of these, is data management, of course. We have a lot of data. And Adrian, if you could click once, please. The Climate Resilience Centers spread across all of the division. Along with that, we have other initiatives like FAIR, Renew, and Urban IFL that are across the division and beyond. Next slide, please. This is all of us. Up and along the top is the green with the environmental system science. Down in the middle, you can see a few of us in the atmosphere. And the lower right is Earth Environmental Systems Modeling. And a few of the other folks that help us do our job as well. Next slide. These are examples of how we invest our resources in EESSD, different mechanisms and different things that are coming in. We'll start on the left in the labs. We have these large initiatives called science focus areas. One of them I already mentioned is the Watershed Function SFA. That's where the SAIL campaign is deployed near Gothic, Colorado. Along with those, we have large projects, NG Arctic, RG Tropics, looking at environments in the Arctic and the tropics, a bunch of other large ongoing long-term projects. We have boutique projects as well. People may have typically a single PI leading this for a particular subject that they're interested in. They can include university collaborators, sometimes in a fairly large role as well. And laboratory researchers as well will collaborate on university projects. So that'll be important to a lot of the folks on this particular call. On the right-hand side, the university research is typically supported through funding opportunity announcements, FOAs, like this one. These are topically focused projects. They can vary in size and duration. Some people just keep winning and keep going. Others are more of a sort of, they come and go away. They can be programmatic individually or division-wide. Of particular interest will be the urban IFLs, urban integrated field laboratories, large multi-institution projects studying urban environments, the early career research program, and Renew and FAIR. We'll get to those later on. Next slide, please. The user facilities, these are a couple of things. These are available to you free. Just apply to them. You get to use world-class resources with world-class people running these instruments. So you don't have to do that. If you want to show up with your widget at SAIL and they will run the radars for you, they'll run the nephelometers, all that stuff, you can do what you do best. They will help coach you through all the other stuff. They're familiar with this. These are the folks that run these things all the time. And the data, for sure, for ARM is freely available. You can see the ARM Discovery website at the bottom. At any time, you could go in right now and start exploring the data, setting up your ideas and seeing what you'd like to be able to do. EMSL is available as well. They have a huge amount of instrumentation there, world-class instrumentation of all different types. This is a great resource, regardless of whether you will apply to CRC, to this particular FOA. Anytime you can come in and apply for these. And next slide. With this, I will hand off to Bob Valarian.
Thanks, Jeff. Next slide, please. So putting faces to names, you'll see us on the right of the Zoom too, but you've already heard and had been introduced to Brian. Just heard from Jeff, and I'm Bob Valario. Next slide, please. And so one of the things we want to do is step back and give you some context and overview. And one of the places maybe we think would be a good place to start is talking about how we're viewing the term climate resilience within the FOA and within our division. So we've defined it and we've mined the internet for this and adapted it and so forth. But climate resilience is the ability of a community or region to reach full recovery after being exposed to climate-induced stresses and damages, using strategies that adjust its adaptive capacity at minimal impact to natural, socioeconomic, infrastructural, and financial systems. That's a guidepost, at least in terms of how we're thinking about it. And then what are some of the other dimensions? So CRCs are intended to provide an embedded, community-focused research agenda that aligns with our mission, the BER mission, and community priorities to promote accessibility and utility for subsequent use in community decision-making and action. So there's a research component, there's a translation component, there's a stakeholder engagement component. Next slide, please. And further carrying on this message, this is really SC's first foray into a funding opportunity announcement with a focus on establishing climate resilience centers, in particular, in this case, at non-R1 minority serving institutions, historically Black colleges and universities, and emerging research institutions. The CRCs will focus on basic climate science research to inform the needs of stakeholders, as previously mentioned, and frontline communities, with an interest in informing equitable solutions in response to the climate crisis. So the CRCs will extend DOE-supported climate science and capabilities. Make no mistake, this isn't just about translation, but there is a research capability building dimension to this, and extending and linking up with the national laboratories to address regional resilience needs and impacts on natural, socioeconomic, or built systems and their intersections. They're intended to foster capacity at regional and local scales by connecting with affected communities and stakeholders, and ultimately to form a nucleus for building and empowering a future pool of local talent and expertise, including young scientists, engineers, and technicians who will combine observational, experimental, and modeling capabilities consistent with those thrusts within our division to address local resilience challenges. Next slide, please. The funding opportunity will provide, and this is mildly redundant, but I don't think we can say it enough times, will provide funding to build research capacity in climate resilience, leveraging these ongoing capabilities, while really enhancing this two-way engagement. And this engagement is critically important because not only are we looking to provide capabilities for these stakeholder communities, but there are many capabilities and insights that actually can be drawn from and brought back into our research understanding and planning. Applications must include a connection to BER climate science, partnership with an for example, but not required, a partnership with an existing SFA or project, or clear use of BER research products. Some aspect of that is what we're driving towards. And then a research focus should be directly relevant to the applicant's community region, focusing on climate science as it relates to equitable resilience and disadvantaged communities. Next slide, please. CRCs will focus on basic climate research. Importantly, the centers will emphasize science translation. Examples of science challenges that the CRCs may address include developing contextualized community-based definitions and models of resilience, illuminating dynamic processes, quantifiable dimensions, and metrics that can be incorporated to measure progress, developing new and insightful prediction tools and exploring their use through model and data-driven stress testing to evaluate adaptation strategies that can be achieved in desired levels of equitable resilience over time, or building or extending observational capabilities to provide the necessary data for new predictions or improve prediction accuracy. These three are really just intended to illustrate, okay? This is not, you're not limited to these. We wanted to give you at least an example of the kinds of things that we're thinking about. But ultimately, the choice is yours as to what you choose to do, so long as it fits within the other parameters that we've defined for this FOA. And then CRCs are required to leverage the scientific products and or capabilities at the DOE or national laboratories. That is a requirement. So next slide. You've already heard from Jeff that there's a multitude of initiatives. You remember that pop-up that came up on the one slide that he mentioned. So one of them is indeed these climate resilience centers. These are cross-cutting capabilities and projects or anticipated projects funded areas, spanning the division. The second is FAIR, which is funding to accelerate inclusive research, institutional research capacity building to accelerate competitiveness. The third is reaching a new energy sciences workforce, RENEW, which focuses on experiential training of students in BER science areas. And a fourth, one that I'm actually involved in, in particular as well, is this multi-institution projects that are focused on basic research in urban systems. They're called affectionately the urban IFLs. Next slide, please. So at this point, I would like to turn it over to my colleague, Brian, to take it from here and talk about applying applications and applying to the climate FOA, climate resilience FOA.
Thanks, Bob. Yeah, so I'll be talking to you here about some of the more technical aspects, expectations, and requirements for preparing your applications for this FOA. Next slide, please. So there's going to be a lot of information on these slides. I'm not going to painstakingly go through all of it because it's all repeated in the FOA document, and you'll have copies of these. You'll be able to get copies of these slides to refer back to. But I will try to hit some of the high points, and we're certainly willing to answer any questions you might have on anything that's on these slides or in the FOA during the Q&A period. Some important things to consider. First is that pre-applications are required. If you don't submit a pre-application, you can't even be considered to submit a full application. These pre-applications are due Thursday, January 19th by 5 p.m. The pre-applications need to be submitted through our PAM system. I'll talk a bit about PAMs in a moment. And they need to be submitted by an institutional representative. So this would be someone from Sponsored Research Office or Office of Sponsored Programs or whatever it's called at your particular institution. These can't be submitted by PIs the way they are for a lot of our other FOAs. And that is because there is an institutional limit on the number of pre-applications that can be submitted. Only 2 pre-applications can be submitted per institution as the lead on the application. And that same, by definition, will then apply to the full applications because you're required to submit the pre-application. These pre-applications will be evaluated by the program managers. And you will need to receive a decision of encouraged for your pre-application in order to be eligible to submit a full application. So those decisions on whether your pre-applications are encouraged or discouraged will go out by Friday, February 3rd at 5 p.m. And those will come via PAMs, via that PAM system. If you receive that encouraged decision, you're then eligible to submit a full application. There's still that same limitation on how many applications an institution can send. Full applications being due Thursday, March 30th by effectively midnight, 11:59 p.m. Eastern time. Within the FOA document, there's a listing of the merit review criteria that will be used to evaluate the full applications. And there's also a listing of the program policy factors that are used to prioritize funding recommendations once we've passed that merit review hurdle. And we anticipate awards going out sometime by September 2023. Next slide, please. So we anticipate having $5 million to support awards through this FOA. These awards would have a 3-year performance period and can be budgeted up to $1 million for the total 3-year performance period, the total award. So because of that, we anticipate somewhere between 5 and 7 awards based on the number of meritorious applications we receive and the sizes of their budgets. As I mentioned previously, there are a limitation to 2 pre-applications and associated applications per institution as lead, but institutions can partner on other applications as a subaward. There is also the restriction on eligibility to submit an application, but any institution is eligible to be a subawardee collaborator through a prime application. So there's the opportunity to partner with national labs or with other institutions via a subaward mechanism. Next slide, please. So as I just said, the lead applicant for this FOA must be a historically Black college university, a non-R1 minority serving institution, or an emerging research institution. And there is a list provided through the Office of Science at this link here. It's also linked within the FOA that identifies those designations for individual institutions. So please consult that list to see about who's eligible to be the lead applicant for this FOA. Multi-institutional teaming arrangements can occur through subawards. The roles and responsibilities of all members of that multi-institutional team must be commensurate and justifiable and equitable. Basically, they need to make sense. The lead institution should be just that. They should have that primary role, that leadership role in the research activities, and partnering institution should play a substantial role or a significant role that's commensurate with the level of budget support requested. DOE national labs are eligible to collaborate on awards, and they're eligible to request funding in support of that collaboration, but that is limited to a total of 10% of the total award budget. So if you request the full $1 million, that means that the sum of all national lab collaborations can't exceed $100,000 for the total award. And as I mentioned earlier, BER will use the program policy factors described in the FOA when making selections, including prioritizing participation of institutions historically underrepresented within the BER portfolio. Next slide. An important new addition to all of our funding opportunity announcements and all the funding actions through the Office of Science this year is the requirement to include a peer plan. PEER stands for Promoting Inclusive and Equitable Research. These plans are meant to describe the activities and strategies that promote equity and inclusion as an intrinsic element of the research project. So not only do we expect the projects and the proposal narratives themselves to describe a research plan that promotes inclusivity and equitability, but we need this specific plan provided, in this case as Appendix 5, that describes how the project would foster a positive, inclusive, and professional training and research environment. These shouldn't just be a rehashing of institutional policies and procedures. These should be tailored for the needs specific to the research being proposed. And there's a lot of specific instructions and information provided on what needs to go into these peer plans, both in the FOA and at the webpage linked here on the slide. But feel free to reach out with any questions you might have. Next slide. So now we'll get into a few helpful reminders for submitting your applications. First is there's a lot of systems that you need that PIs and or the sponsored research office need to be registered in order to be able to submit pre-applications and full applications. These can take a considerable amount of time. Please make sure that you are registered and that there's an appropriate registration within these systems in advance. I'll call attention to our portfolio analysis and management system, the PAMS system. This is our DOE system for managing applications. The help desk would be your source of information or help should you have technical issues with the website itself. Program managers, we're not able to help you all that much in terms of how to get access or if you're having a technical issue with uploading or downloading something from the site. So please reach out to the PAMS help desk. They do close outside of regular business hours. They close at 5:30. There is a wiki that we've linked here that you can try to look up information on your own outside of business hours, but please make sure to contact them in advance to make sure that you are registered within PAMS. Next slide. And just to kind of hammer that home, in particular, because the pre-applications need to be submitted by someone with submitted to PAMS and by someone with that SRO submit to PAMS privilege within their account. Please make sure that your institution account is active, that the appropriate contacts are listed. We've had many instances where the person who was the PAMS contact has changed positions or has left the institution, and the emails that get generated by PAMS go to a mailbox that no one ever accesses. So please make sure that you have a PAMS account, that the right people are indicated on those PAMS accounts, and if possible, that there are multiple people in these roles to make sure that should someone be on leave or something like that, it doesn't hold up your ability to submit your documents on time. Keeping in mind that the PAMS help desk does close at 5:30, which is why our pre-application submission deadline is 5 p.m. Next slide. There, in the beginning of the FOA, there are two sections that are going to be really helpful for making sure that you've checked all the boxes when submitting your applications. These are the updates and reminders, as well as the checklist for avoiding common errors section. Please make sure to review those and make sure that you've addressed all the technical requirements for submitting your application. This includes making sure that you've used all the standardized forms that are linked and indicated within the FOA document. And all projects, all applications submitted to the Office of Science need to include a data management plan. If for some reason you feel that your project doesn't require a data management plan, you still need to submit a data management plan that says there will be no data that needs to be managed. You need to provide something, and that needs to make sense. But there are instructions for what constitutes an effective data management plan in the FOA, as well as in a couple places through the BER website and the Office of Science website. Next slide, please. And then for the full proposal, should you be submitting a full application, just some helpful reminders for submitting your budget and budget justification. Please make sure that all the requested items in your budget sheets are justified within the budget justification. All costs need to be justified and sufficiently described for us to evaluate. We do allow for applicants to request funds in support of capital equipment. These would be individual items with an individual price tag greater than $5,000, up to a total of $15,000 for capital equipment. So these are going to be single items that have a price tag over $5,000, not we need 5 of something that cost $1,000. Those would go under materials and supplies. Please make sure that when calculating any fringe or indirect cost rates, that the rates that the rates being used are in agreement with your indirect cost agreement that's been federally negotiated. And please make sure that any personnel costs are inclusive of all salary and fringe. Next slide, please. And here we just have a list of a number of web links that could be helpful when considering your application, places to find more information on activities within BER and within EESSD. These are provided here as well as in the FOA document. And you can find a lot of information through the individual programmatic websites, which are listed here as well. Next slide. And so with that, we'll wrap things up and we can switch over and get some questions from you. If your questions aren't answered today, or if you have additional questions, feel free to reach out to the program managers. If there are any sort of business process questions about submitting your application, you can submit those through fedconnect.net and get more assistance or get responses through that mechanism. But with that, I will turn it back to Jeff.
Thank you, Brian. So now it's a free-for-all. This is really all about you. So we wanted to get through that as efficiently without sounding like auctioneers as possible. This is all about outreach and broadening the folks who are applying to our programs and bringing to bear the full brain power of this country. So let it rip.
So we have been answering some questions in the chat. And we've had a couple questions about the slide. Those will be posted to the BER site. So they'll be posted, I'll put it in the chat. They'll be posted to this site next week, probably, as soon as we get everything processed and up. And then
Allison,
yeah.
Did we make a decision? Will it be the same site? I think we're planning on posting a recording of this too. Do you want to provide information on that?
Yes, the recording will be on YouTube, but it will be linked from this site under the entry for the Climate Resilience Centers that is, under additional funding opportunity announcements. So it'll appear there next week. And then I think we will also probably send out a message to registrants saying that these are available. So if you have other questions that haven't been answered, go ahead and drop those in. There's one, there's a specific mention of HBCUs, but not HSIs, the Hispanic Serving Institutions. Is there a reason for that?
Yes, there is. And it's actually very easy. Historically, Black colleges and universities are statutorily defined by a fixed list. Hispanic serving institutions, along with all other minority serving institutions, including ANAPESES, are defined annually on an updated list from the Department of Education based on the percentage of enrolled, not matriculated students at that campus. Therefore, we can very easily refer to HBCUs as a fixed list. MSIs, including HSIs, ANAPESES, and every other designation, are a continually moving target, which is why we also have tried to provide a consolidated list with the most recent MSI designations in every category, the HBCUs, and the Carnegie classifications, and the Emerging Research Institution designations. It's a little bit of a lift for data management, but we're pretty good at that.
And that's the Institute designations and classifications list that I just dropped in the chat.
Absolutely it is.
Great, thank you. That's a really helpful answer. About the focus of regional climate impact, what is the scale of the region? Does a city, county, or it can be an entire state such as California?
I don't think we included anything in particular here. I might suggest that the entire state of California is a bit large, but with different problems around it. I mean, sure, water is going to be a universal issue. So I might suggest that you might be better served by finding a smaller region, but that's more of a tactical decision and sort of a grantsmanship type decision. And so you can chat with us about what you might like to do, but focus will be important.
Okay. Will the review process prioritize proposals with all three components, research, translation, and community engagement, over a good proposal that only addresses one or two?
So I might take that one. I think it's pretty clear through the proposal that we're looking for all three elements. We're not looking, for example, under a scenario I could envision with that question or implied in that question, could we just do research? I think the answer is unequivocally no. We are looking for connections, and doing the research and building connections with local communities and translating and making more accessible our research in that environment. So all of those elements are really needed. To what extent you emphasize some elements more than others, that's up to you. But I would say, I'll invite my colleagues to weigh in too. All three elements need to be there and need to have some minimum capacity to demonstrate that you're responsive to this particular FOA. I don't know, Jeff and Brian.
I think you pretty well nailed it, Bob. I think you can emphasize a little more of one or another, depending on the particular nature of the project. I think the idea of including research was a lot of institutions reward people for research. And there may be an aspect, we also want you to be involved in this. So there should be a big carrot for you. This should not just be, you're not a conduit, you're a co-equal participant in this activity. So you get to participate, build some of the additional research. You can identify a need in there and fill that gap and translate that. So I think we really do want this to be all three. And I especially like the fact that Bob pointed out, these are not for strictly research projects. The translation and communication and to the folks that are doing planning has to be an essential part of it.
I have a follow-up question that's related to that. Since the FOA focuses on stakeholder engagement, can the funding be used for survey, interview, focus group discussion that considered as social science?
Well, so this is a little bit of a tough question, but let's say, stepping back for a minute, one of the clear criteria is that it's responsive to and fits within the EESD, the EESSD, the BER mission. Social sciences is not a main focus for our mission within BER. We oftentimes use and collaborate with NSF and some others in bringing in that component, but an effort focused predominantly on social sciences and stakeholder engagement probably wouldn't review particularly strongly. We'd have some questions about its relevance. So I'd encourage you to think about some of the other foci that we really pursue within the BER mission in our climate and environmental space, and try to marry it up with that to make it a more collective capability of research, translation, and stakeholder engagement. That's my off-the-cuff reaction to that. Others?
Yeah, I think they can, the key here is interacting with the decision makers, right? So we're not going to go out and survey an entire community writ large. Although, Gary, would you like to jump in for a sec?
Sure. I guess I can't control the video. Maybe I can. Let's see.
I think Allison could help you with that.
I just asked if you could start it. So
Okay.
you are in control of the video.
Yeah, I think a couple of things to keep in mind is that the way DOE does business is we do system science. And that's one of the reasons why we try to combine all the components. Oh, now I'm starting my video. Good. So we tend to do system science. And I would say that distinguishes us from a lot of other agencies that might look at one component versus another. The question about social science is a good one. We did launch the urban IFLs very recently. We have 4 of them, which are in motion now. Formally, they all do some form of social science, but it's in the context of system science. There are even going to be some types of surveys of some sort with at least one of them. But keep in mind that you're going to have to go through an institutional review board to do that. And that's not necessarily bad because we're preparing for that with the urban IFLs. So I would say social science or socioeconomic sciences is allowed, but keep it in the context of the system science.
And Gary, when you say system science, I think, if I could elaborate, you're talking about interactions with physical and natural systems, which was from observations and a modeling and a experimental focus within the urban IFLs, kind of a key focus there. So yeah, I think your additions were really good. Yeah.
Yeah, and the division's focus broadly is on predictive understanding. So if it adds value to predictive understanding, I think you're right on target. Okay, I'll go back into disappearance mode.
Thank you. That was very helpful. And just so everyone knows, urban IFLs are the urban integrated field laboratories. Okay. Another question. If an institution previously has received other BER funding, such as ASR or RDPP, will it be given lower priority of funding than institutions that have never received BER funding before?
Well, so I guess I'd say the first hurdle is merit review. I mean, so we take everything and make sure that it's a meritorious application and evaluate the strength of what's being proposed. Within those meritorious applications, that's sort of when the program policy factors come into play. One of those is balance within the portfolio, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there's an automatic upgrading or downgrading of prioritization for institutions that have received prior funding.
Especially for RDPP, if you won an RDPP award, the purpose of that was to bring you in and have you talk to people. So If you want an RDPP, oh, absolutely, you can win another one. Absolutely. So while we don't want one institution to pile up award after award after award, we do want to broaden the participation. I don't think we would shut anybody down if they have a really good proposal and it meshes well with others. Like Brian said, the merit comes first.
Okay. Are there any constraints in terms of partnerships with DOE, like number of partnerships that a particular SFA or national lab can have for this FOA?
If I could jump in, the short answer is no, but there are restrictions in the amount of funding, for example, that can go to any combination of national labs, and it's not of particularly high ceiling, but there are the potential to have unfunded collaborations and partnerships, and we encourage those as well. And I don't believe that there are constraints on the university side. Maybe my colleagues can weigh in there.
I don't think, one thing I might point out is that the lab participation total is capped at 10% of the total award. So that is a restriction. I might also, say that program act policy factors kind of come in here. We aren't going to send out 17 awards to one particular laboratory. So I would suggest that you sort of try to cast a wide net, participate with more, with other laboratories. So there shouldn't be 15 coming in from one lab.
And at the opposite end of the spectrum, as opposed to maybe some of the other FOAs that we've had recently, there is not a requirement to partner with a lab. There's a requirement to make use and to leverage BER research and products and capabilities, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there is an explicit requirement for a funded lab collaboration as part of the award.
And nor does it
as part of the application.
Great, Brian. And nor does it mean that it's limited to funded national labs, because we fund many other universities and institutions, some very large projects. So, we look forward to you leveraging those if the opportunity presents as well.
Great, thank you. Since this is for a center, how much is appropriate for the research activities to address research development, workshops, travel to attend PI meetings, develop new collaborations, purchase equipment, versus research execution, new numerical experiments for publishable science?
My thought here is that the budget should reflect the reality of the work, and the work we've sort of talked a bit about, how we want equal amounts of these different categories. And so that might involve some travel. And as usual, there's a little bit of grantsmanship involved, where if you had a proposal that was 50% travel, it wouldn't review very well. I would say let it reflect the nature of the work, and let the work really, the science plus the translation and the interaction dictate the budgeting.
Yeah, I don't think we have any preconceived notions of what the right balance is.
Yeah.
But there does need to be a research capacity building and research innovation component to your work, maybe beyond meeting and just networking. So to the degree that you come up with new and innovative research capabilities and apply them in some meaningful way and link up with your stakeholders and translate the results, so much the better. But I think just leveraging the work of others and not bringing a new research dimension or capability to the table, as Jeff said, I think might not review particularly well. So, but we're not going to limit it or restrict it. I don't think we would screen that in the pre-application phase, but I can't say definitively. But I honestly think that you might have a tough time with a cadre of research panelists that look at this.
We have a hypothetical. Let's say you received a highly highly meritorious application from an HBCU as lead institution with 1 PI and 2 co-PIs from non-HBCU R1 institutions. Will this application be rejected due to the reduced involvement at the HBCU institution?
It wouldn't be rejected. I mean, especially if as it said, if it's a meritorious application, it's not. It would meet the eligibility criterion for the FOA. That being said, as described in the FOA, there needs to be appropriate balance and distribution of responsibilities commensurate with the roles of those individual institutions.
I might add that these will be peer reviewed, and the reviewers, when they see something, if they see something that has a tiny slice of HBCU and big slices for R1s, it can look like somebody is just trying to open up a storefront and be a front for these people. That's not the intention of CRCs. The intention of CRCs is to broaden the community, broaden the participants, and bring these folks into the active research community, as they always should have been. So balance is good, and certainly make use of big institutions' resources, but let the non-R1s and the HBCUs and all these communities lead and do the research, do the work.
Thank you. This is a good question. Since we've mentioned the urban IFLs a lot, could you elaborate on how this FOA, the climate resilience centers, will be different or similar, symbiotic? How will they work with the IFL call?
Yeah, fair question. And the IFL call is past the call phase, and we've moved forward with 4 major funded teams. You can find press releases on that. Maybe one of the notable differences I'll just start with is the sheer size of the urban IFLs. They are quite large, from a couple of million to a little bit larger per year at these locations, and they require, as an example, 3 main elements that include field experiments and observations, modeling, and the third one is escaping me, but they actually are intended to capitalize on a term you'll hear eventually if you are funded within our group, called MODEX, which is short for model. Well, help me here, Brian or Jeff. It's model, observation, something or other, experiments, right?
Model experiment, yeah, the model to experiment. Yeah.
So it's building monitoring stations and a whole bunch of other things that are equipment and capital intensive and so forth within these environments, basically doing fairly hardcore urban research focused on the physical science dimensions while having a socioeconomic component as well. Okay. But the sheer magnitude and scope of those is, and the multidisciplinary nature of those, we have some that have, major subawards to 8, 9, 13, different institutions, multiple national labs, extending way beyond the 10% that we've set for these smaller CRCs, and a lot of other university players. So they're just in scope and magnitude much different. We would encourage you, since they are funded BER activities, to link up with them. If you choose to do one in a similar location or a sister location because of typology of characteristics and stresses and so forth, we would hope that you would link up with them and those projects just as you would the others. And in one instance, there's actually a national lab that is leading. In 3 of the other instances, there are universities that are leading those activities. If anyone else wants to jump in.
I just had Allison post the Urban IFL link in the chat so that people can dig in as deep as they want. I think Urban IFLs would be a natural thing to link up with for CRCs. That would be fabulous. Personally, I would love to see that.
Great. Do you anticipate this program being offered again next year? Do you have that foresight?
Ask Congress. My crystal ball is pretty foggy these days.
All right. It depends on congressional appropriations.
Depends on appropriations. That's probably the more concise way of putting it, yes.
As do all of our current ongoing projects that we're closely watching.
Yeah, we're
That's
in a
true.
continuing resolution right now, folks, so.
Okay, for this fellow, would there be a conflict of interest in terms of being awarded funding if the PI and its affiliated partners have also applied for funding through other federal programs, such as the NSF Engines program? If not, what is the best approach to develop a proposal in coordination with these other funding sources?
The best answer from the research administration side is don't worry about it too much at the stage of proposal. You are allowed to submit the same research concept to multiple funding agencies. However, the funding agencies have an obligation not to duplicate each other's support for work, and you as a potential recipient of federal funds have an obligation not to charge the same amount of work to two different agencies. Some of our colleagues with badges and guns really don't like that. So I'd really recommend against it. But there's nothing wrong with submitting the same proposal or similar proposals for related work. What we then need to do is at the time of award selection, ensure that we are negotiating to properly parse out the scope of work so that we can clearly say, this agency is doing this piece of the work and that agency is doing a different piece, even if there are appreciable synergies and interrelatedness. We just want to make sure that we're not paying for the same thing twice.
Thank you. That was really helpful.
That will also be, it's in your current and pending support, so people can see it when they're reviewing it. And that is very often raised. In fact, every time is raised by reviewers when they see that. And we're also pretty good friends with folks at NSF and NASA and NOAA. So we tend to get wind of when things have common roots like this.
Yep. And then just to wrap up, in case everyone has to leave for 2 o'clock, the slides and video will be available on the website. I'm posting that to the chat. Someone asked if we could get the slides after this meeting, since the recording will take a little while. I'm guessing we can send those out as soon as you guys approve of that in the next couple hours.
Yes.
Or on Monday.
It won't take long.
Okay, great. So yes, we will send those out to the registrants for the webinar. And I think that's it in the questions. If you have any more questions, feel free to submit them. I think we still have, we can have up to another half hour, but if you need to leave, it is almost 2 o'clock. So submit questions if you still have them, if we haven't answered what you need. So we'll just hang out and
yeah, all of our contact information, well, at least for me, Bob, and Brian, our contact information is in the presentation. And you can just sort of Google us and you'll find us. Feel free to contact us, because this is literally our job, and this is actually one of the more enjoyable parts of our job. I mean, it's a lot of fun hearing Mike Zarkin talk about some of these things, you know.
the ins and outs of the legal side. Yeah.
I've been in research administration almost 20 years. Haven't lost a program manager yet, nor have I lost a PI.
Excellent. Well, I don't see any other questions coming in, so I think we can probably wrap up. Anybody want to say anything to wrap up?
Yeah, I want to thank everyone for coming. We had well over 100 attendees today. This is spectacular to see so many people interested in this. I personally am really excited about this, because when we're funding a lot of this research, we really want it to get to this stage where it actually helps people make decisions. So we'd love to hear from you. Please submit your applications. And this is one of the FOAs that I am most excited about this year. So thank you for all you do, and go for it.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you, everyone, and have a great weekend.